All right. This is my first video I've ever done for a astrological band analysis. I'm very excited to do it for one of my all-time favorite groups. I really can't think of another group that I should do before Led Zeppelin. By far, one of the most creative, adventurous, amazingly talented group of musicians in human history, and especially the last 40 years. Uh, it's such a pleasure to be able to talk about this band. So, where to begin? Where to begin? Let's start with the Leo, of course. So, here we are. We have four individuals. We have two Capricorns and a Gemini and a Leo. The Leo, the singer, the center of attention in a lot of ways, the mouthpiece for the band, the person who is able to add fire, pure molten fire, and you hear it time and time again on so many Zeppelin tracks. There's so many to even, honestly, every Zeppelin track has that fire in some sense, but especially, God, I mean, Since I've Been Loving You off of Led Zeppelin 3, just I can't do, I'm not a tenor like Plant, but just the stratospheric wails of a banshee all come from that fire that Robert has, and not just as a Leo, but also online it's very much said that he's got rising Sag, and that adds to that fire, adds to the adventurousness, and we'll get into how that plays more. There's so much to talk about, so we'll get back to that. The Capricorns, we have two Capricorns here. We have Jimmy Page, guitarist, virtuoso, very interesting Capricornian background of having a solid job in music before he actually joined Led Zeppelin. Before, rather, he kind of masterminded and provided that key guitar arranger role. It should be noted, as amazing as Jimmy Page is, Led Zeppelin is these four individuals, and this, the focus can be too much on Page sometimes because these other three individuals are absolutely instrumental to this band. For example, Black Dog, one of the most famous Led Zeppelin songs ever, and I'm sure you recognize it by that riff. That was by John Paul Jones, actually, and other arrangements throughout the years and whatnot, other song ideas have come from the other three members. But still, let's focus back on Page. Page mastered. By the time of Led Zeppelin, he'd been in the Yardbirds, he had been a studio musician for several years, and he had mastered his part of the equation. And indeed, he understood how to be an efficient producer as well. That's something that's really great about Led Zeppelin, is that Page was the producer. He had the vision. They didn't necessarily bring in somebody else to try and add that kind of the job of a producer is an interesting one because you are looking at the entire picture, looking at all the different individual pieces and how they interplay and how they work together. That's a very specific gift. Not all musicians have that. Page has that, and always has had it. And it's just incredible, his ability to understand. For example, in his producing, he one of the biggest things was really one of the most simplest things is simply miking the drums in a way to make them pop, to make them have their full power, and to really allow them to just breathe. That was one of the biggest things, and indeed that's what Page has said was his proudest producing accomplishment. It's just allowing the drums to breathe, to mic them correctly. And that's another part of producing as well, is the engineering part, is how are we going to make this sound? You know, we have the music, great, but how does it translate onto record? And what Page did was simply put the mics a little bit farther away. And on, for example, a track like Levee Breaks, one of the Levee Breaks off Led Zeppelin 4, one of my all-time favorite tracks, let alone a favorite Zepp track. Excuse me. You hear the ingeniousness of that mic placement far away from the drums in a lift shaft, or not a lift shaft. Watch the documentary This Could Get Loud to see what I'm talking about. But at Headley Grange, where they recorded Led Zeppelin 4, I believe, jammed out a lot of Houses of the Holy, their next album, and I think actually a bit of Physical Graffiti as well. maybe a bit of Led Zeppelin 3 as well, but definitely Led Zeppelin 4. That was the centerpiece. Indeed, the song Black Dog came from a black dog that would wander around Headley Grange, where the musicians were all four of Led Zepp were staying and creating music together, where they made some of the most iconic music of their catalog and of music in general. Stairway to Heaven, again, Black Dog, When the Levee Breaks. That's just an incredible album, and it's well deserved that it's one of the most successful albums of all time. And that Stairway to Heaven in particular is such a, and Black Dog, you still hear it on radio all the time. Maybe not as much obviously as the 70s, but radio is different anyway. So in any case, yes, the Capricornian aspect. And it's interesting because John Paul Jones share this as well. And again, they are the two Capricorns. They're born only 5-6 days away from each other. They both had jobs as studio musicians before. John Paul Jones is bass, and I'm not sure if he did keyboard in his session years, but certainly an amazing bassist, an amazing keyboardist. No Quarter, perfect example of his mastery of his instrument, of the keyboard. But you have both of these Capricorns that are just incredibly, incredibly skilled already before the time that Led Zeppelin comes together. They've worked on so many different projects, gotten to dip their hands into so many different musical currents. And when Led Zeppelin forms, my God, it's just, you have two people that are incredibly competent. And if you think about it, we have, especially looking at Led Zeppelin live, but just in general, you have two main string instrumentalists, a guitarist and a bassist, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones. And between them, between their musical genius, they create such vast vistas for John Bonham to add his musical element. And that's where our Gemini comes in to put it all together. And it's so interesting. I've done an astrological study a couple years ago of talking about all of the Gemini drummers who are out there, and as well as drummers who have Gemini. For example, Ringo Starr having Venus in Gemini, or so many drummers have had Mars in Gemini, Moon, etc. But goodness, it's amazing. But and it makes sense too, because that's what a Gemini does. Speaking from a Gemini's, from personal experience, we are adept at threading together the different weaves. We're adept at on the fly making connections, and having a Gemini with these two Capricorns and this Leo, all of this power, those three individuals, all of this power, all of this mastery, all of this potential. You need that Gemini to come in to tie it all together and to add that rhythmic flair, that nice natural flair that Bonham has. It's amazing. Some of my favorite songs and some of my favorite drum beats, my favorite feels of Led Zeppelin come from very simple approaches. Since I've Been Loving You, another perfect example, again, my all-time favorite songs of just very simple, but it's just so in the pocket. And if you want to see a bit more of a faster representation of Bonham's skill and his ability to really tie a piece together and to propel it forward at the same time, listen to Achilles' Last Stand, again, another one of my absolute favorite songs. And you hear how, it's not the most complicated drumming in the world, that particular song. Bonham is an amazing drummer, don't get me wrong. He's extremely complicated in other songs, and his skills are incredible. But that's what's beautiful about Bonham. And the same thing that's beautiful about Ringo Starr and Charlie Watts, and also those drummers who are very great drummers, but they're able to sit back and they're able to just play what the song needs. And indeed, sometimes not to play at all. Stairway to Heaven, he doesn't even come in until the last half. That's what's so great about John Bonham, is as amazing as he is, and just a whirlwind of energy and expertise rhythmically, he is able, Kashmir, another perfect example of him sitting back. He is able to get in the pocket and just own it seamlessly. And it makes sense how after he died in 1980, it makes sense that why Led Zeppelin just couldn't continue, because all four of these individuals are so instrumental to the overall organism. It's not even a product. No, it's an organism, as all great bands should be, or really all great collective human efforts should be. And when Bonham passed, this band really, nobody could fill those shoes. Part of that seamlessness, his ability to just do what the song called for, no more, no less, is that Gemini, but it's also a lot of his moon in Pisces, his ability to really feel out, like, okay, where are they coming from? And that's what's really great, is this rapport between Bonham and Page. Page having moon in Cancer in the house of Scorpio, both water energies, moon in Pisces by Bonham, and also incidentally, Robert Plant also has moon in Pisces. So you have this nice water trifecta happening between the three of them, and it's nice for John Paul Jones too. He has moon in Capricorn, so that there's he's in the mix, of course, and he's needed to stabilize all these watery individuals, these emotional, searching, poetic souls. You need to have somebody like JPJ to get it all to focus and get it, to be a bit more stable. But in any case, you have this really nice rapport between Page and Bonham that is just so natural, and it's interesting because, of course, Bonham and John Paul Jones as a rhythm section, they were so cohesive and they came together so nicely. But it's interesting to know how the guitar and the drums interplay, and that's one of my favorite things about Led Zeppelin. As a drummer and a guitarist myself, but especially guitar being my first instrument, it's great to have somebody who's playing drums, who's able to sit back and be in the pocket and whatnot, and yet not lose sight of the melody. He was so in tune with the melody. And one of my favorite examples is this fill on Achilles' Last Stand, where Bonham is, and this happens so much in Led Zeppelin's music, but there's just such a beautiful interplay between Page and Bonham's playing, where Bonham is, he just comes out with this monster fill, and it's really simple, but again, it's so perfectly placed, with snare and crash, and it's in response to something that Page is playing earlier in the song, right before. So one of the best parts about Led Zeppelin is this natural feel between the different members. And again, I don't wish to just to not include JPJ at all in this, because of course he's there. He has his own water energies of Mars and Cancer, which is instrumental at stabilizing the more whirlwind energies. For example, Mars and Gemini of Jimmy Page is playing so fast and so just all over the place in a good way. You need somebody to stabilize that and to keep it like, okay, that's great. I'll support that. I'll help you with that. And of course, then the vocal wails of Robert Plant with his Mars and Libra in the House of Aquarius and whatnot, of just the four members had such a beautiful, seamless ability to come together and to really let their individual star shine while being at service to the cohesive element of being in a group. And it's so cool that when they would play live, for example, there'd be so much improvisation, there'd be a natural feeling. It was an organic thing. It wasn't a cut and dry experience, making and playing this music. And so when these four individuals did get together, the potential is limitless in all directions. And it's just very sad that we don't have this group around today, because God, and in the meantime, from 1980 until this point, that's a good 35 years of music that Led Zeppelin could have been making, could have been experimenting, with hip-hop and with the alternative and the garage rock revivals going on in the 90s and then 2000s. It would have been so interesting, let alone the 80s and its particular nuances. It would have been so interesting to see Led Zeppelin go through all that and to see how they incorporate it all, because for example, they're on Houses of the Holy, you have such a beautiful, and that's my favorite Led Zeppelin album because of this, you have such a beautiful hodgepodge of different songs, of different feels. You have something as quick and with such an exhilarating pace and feel as Song Remains the Same, and then you have something as soft as the Rain song, and then something as epic as Over the Hills and Far Away, and something as creepy and dark as No Quarter, going to funk with the crunge, going with reggae influence for Jamaica, and of course that beautiful hard rock gem, The Ocean. This is such a, oh my god, and of course one of my favorite songs of all time, Dancing Days, another just amazing, again, not the most complicated, for example that riff, da 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 da, not the most complicated, but there's the four members came together so nicely, naturally. And it's just it's just a shame that it ended so quickly, you know. Quickly relatively. I mean, you know, 11 years of them playing and making music together, that's a long time, but it's when you have such a natural chemistry like this band, it's just a shame when it's no longer there because one of the members being gone. But in any case, let's move on. So, yeah, that water rapport, as we were talking about with the moon, with John Bonham and Jimmy Page, in particular, just musically, is really interesting to look out for, and I really advise you check it out. A good example of this, and granted the bass is in this as well, but a good example of this is the Immigrant Song. Is they're playing basically the same thing, and so powerful. That's what's beautiful. Is yes, they're able to separate, and Bonham and JPJ are able to set that solid rhythmic foundation for Page and Plant to have solos and just amazing wails, and just to have the beautiful, exhilarating feeling of being alive and playing music just pour out. But they're also able to really key into each other. And so, for example, on Immigrant Song, you have these three just monster instrumental tracks working together. It's a testament to this group's chemistry that they're able to lock in so tightly, and also to be tight while being very loose. And again, there's so many improvs, so much development in Led Zeppelin's live show, a show I really would have loved to have seen for myself, that it really speaks to these four individuals, again, as individual musicians, but also together. So let's cycle back to Plant. We've had kind of a nice overview. Robert Plant, beautiful lyrics, sometimes very earthy lyrics, direct, sensual. Hey mom said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's what's kind of nice about Led Zeppelin, is they do have a lot of sex-related songs. A couple things. First, sex is a part of life. Second, it's nice to hear music that is sexual or sensual, and that isn't blunt or boring about it. You know, obviously, yes, there are a couple of lyrics. For example, in the Lemon Song, you know, squeeze my lemon so the juice runs down my leg, which is actually an earlier blues lyric. But in any case, there are obviously some times, I think that's the most explicit, but you don't really hear sex being I don't know, there's a poetic sensibility in the lyrics of Led Zeppelin, especially as time goes on and Plant becomes more naturally comfortable in that role. He wasn't so comfortable in the first role, and in the first album, for example, writing the lyrics, and there was a lot of direct influence from blues, and a lot of help from Jimmy Page as well. And I believe on the second album as well, there's a couple Jimmy Page aided lyrics as well. But from Led Zeppelin 3 and onward, you just have this amazing, and honestly, there's great lyrics on those first two records as well, but you really hear the Mercury in Virgo reach another part of itself with Robert Plant, you know, that energy. Instead of just being, Mercury and Earth energy can be very direct and blunt, and so you have the more sensual sex, you know, and all that stuff, which is whatever. But then you hear songs with lyrics like The Mystery of the Quotient in the Rain Song, or The Winds of Thor are blowing cold, or Come from the land of the ice and snow where the midnight sun and the hot springs. It's just like genius, and it still makes you just escape into this world they create. Without Robert Plant's lyricism, as well as his incredible vocal ability, and of course everybody knows that it's amazing, his pipes are, but And you know, a true Zeppelin fan appreciates his lyrics, but I don't think enough attention is given to Robert and the how. I mean, Kashmir. You know, I am a traveler of both time and space. Be where I've been. It's just, it's him tapping into his contribution to the all. He's really just shining. So let's get to something else about Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. An interesting connection they have is their Sagittarian energies. Jimmy has Venus in Sag, Robert has Jupiter in Sag as well as rising Sag, and they would travel. That's a big thing with Sag energies, to travel, to go out and see the world and to get an experience outside of the norm of your society and your ideas and your beliefs and your perspective. And so they would travel and going to Morocco, for example, or going to Snowdonia in Wales to write Led Zeppelin 3. They would have such inspiration from their travels. And Kashmir, for example, was inspired by their travels to Morocco, even though Kashmir is what do you call it? I suppose the Middle East region, I suppose you would say, between Pakistan and India. That's not really Middle East, but in any case, subcontinental India, or Asia. But yeah, their travels would yield such insight, such gems of enthusiasm and excitement. And that plays off so nicely off of Bonham's Gemini, because when you have these two partner signs, Sag and Gemini, energies, and if you're interested in this astrologically, check out my partner sign series and my astrological channel for YouTube. But when you have these two partner signs, there's just they fulfill each other, they enhance each other, they challenge each other, and it's just natural, all of that. And so that Sag energy, the new ideas, the inspiration, the willingness to go off into the norm and out of the norm and just go for it. And by the way, John Paul Jones also has Mercury and Sag, very important element to all this. Hence why I love his bass playing. Mercury and Sag bass players are really incredible. Paul Simonon is another example of this, where they just have a feel, a bounciness, and yet they can play really tight, taut riffs as well. You know, Black Dog, perfect example. It's just these four individuals were so able to go anywhere, and they were brave enough to work on that ability, and of course to develop it and to practice it in the first place as individual musicians. But when they came together, they were so brave to be able to go off in all these different musical adventures, whether it's acoustic or distorted, or has strings, or has horns, or has whatever, a theremin. It's really inspiring to me still, even all this time later, after the making of these albums. I mean, some 45 years later. Is it even 50? No, is it 50? Almost 50. You know, a couple years will be 50. They're still pioneers and innovative to the extreme. Another partner sign bond is the moon sign connection between JPJ and Jimmy Page, and their ability to support each other, to work together and play the same notes. That's so special to me as a guitarist, and working with my buddy Joe in a couple of musical projects who plays bass. When a guitarist and a bassist can sync up so perfectly, and just naturally, temperamentally so, where they're able to play the same thing and add power to it, where it doesn't feel like duplication to a different octave. You know, oh yeah, I'm playing your guitar riff, but I'm just playing it on a lower octave and kind of out of the way. These two individuals pushed each other. These two Capricorns were very, in a good way, not a kind of bad way or anything. I've never heard anything of them competing in any kind of negative sense, or really even it competing in general. It's just being a collaborative effort in which each person was just pushing themselves to reach a higher form of musical ecstasy. Well, you have this between Page and JPJ. They have that ability to support each other, and again, to let each other do their thing as well. And as a Moon in Cancer myself, it's very interesting how it's very interesting how the imagination of a Moon in Cancer, like Jimmy Page, or Robert Plant for that matter, Moon in the House of Cancer, would it mixes so well with Moon and Cap's energy. And it's interesting because Moon and Cap is a lot more reserved. I mean, I guess Moon and Cancer is as well, but Moon and Cap isn't known for being as imaginative as Moon and Cancer. And Moon in Cancer isn't known for being as stable and pragmatic as Moon in Capricorn. And granted, Jimmy is a Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn and all, but it's beautiful to see this bond between these two master individuals that go even before Led Zeppelin, that happened in their studio days. And for it to grow so steadily over the years, and for both of them to give and take so nicely, where you have, for example, on Ramble On, a great acoustic piece by Jimmy, but the bass is where there's I almost want to say melody, because it's so it's so it's hard to put into words. It propels it forward. It catches your attention as well in a way that bassists in other bands, or just bassists in general, other bassists just can't quite tap into. And yet, then you have it's phenomenal at how these two musicians worked together and gave each other that space and gave each other that versatility as well. Again, being in a band is you're always an individual, of course, but you have to have people around you who support your vision and who support your creativity. And that doesn't mean agreeing with you all the time, or saying, or lying to you, or trying to flatter you. No, it's important to be direct and honest and all that, but to have individuals who support your natural musicality and to push you forward, that is the dream for a musician who wants to be in a band. And all four of these individuals really had that space. But it's just so beautiful to see it between two individuals who, Capricorns aren't as humble and hardworking and as naturally self-deprecating as Capricorns can be. They can also be very much control freaks and tyrants. And it's just beautiful to see these two Capricorns working together for a good decade and allowing each other to show their mastery, giving that space. And that says something about all four individuals and their humility in general, and also their musicality, their ability to step outside of themselves and to appreciate what the other individuals are doing. And especially, again, between these two individuals, there was they're both Capricorn, they're both pushing each other, they're both focused on work, and they're focused on just excellence and demanding it of themselves and others. And that moon connection between these two individuals allows them to use that competition to push everyone forward. Use that. They're able to appreciate each other. And really, you could say that for all four members of the group. Again, hence why they fell apart when one of them died. But it's really beautiful to see that. So let's look at another aspect of things. The rhythm section. John Bonham and John Paul Jones. They both have Venus partner signs, right? Venus in Cancer, John Bonham. John Paul Jones, Venus in Capricorn. Their sense of art, their sense of beauty, what Venus represents in our lives, were partner signs. And especially the rhythmic section, this interlocking is beautiful to see, because you have two individuals who naturally are a bit more supportive. These two energies, Venus and Cancer, they aren't quite as frenetic and wild as Venus and Sagittarius, like Jimmy Page, for example. Or even, yeah, we'll get to. And so it's just so great to see those two individuals lock in. John Paul Jones said how it was such like a dream to play with Bonham, because they were able to walk into each other so beautifully, just in a lockstep, and they could play off of each other and know where the other person was going to be. There was a natural understanding with each other, and that happens when Venus comes together like that. But when it comes together for two musicians playing in the same band, and especially in the same kind of section of the band, the rhythmic section, not to divvy up a band or anything, but still, there's that important distinction. It's so great to see that solid foundation. And there really isn't a Zepp song out there that, well, for one, that is, amateurish at all, or even when they adventured out into maybe strange territory, for example, like the crunge, funk, as I was saying before, there was still a mastery there. There was a solidity there. Those parts come together and they work. It may not be your favorite song, or whatever Zepp experimental song may be, In the Light, for example, Physical Graffiti, whatever. I love that song, by the way. But in any case, still, something that's really could be respected and admired, especially from a musician's point of view, is these individuals' ability to become cohesive, and especially, as I was saying, John Paul Jones and John Bonham, to have that solid rhythmic foundation for everything else to come that makes those soaring solos and those amazing piercing screams possible, not let alone magical as they are. It's really great to see that connection, and I invite you to check that out in just listening to bass and drums when you check out Led Zeppelin from now on, just hearing how in sync they are. It's a good example of that. I think a really good example of that is, and there's better examples, I'm sure, but it's simple, it's straightforward. But the verse for How Many More Times off of Led Zeppelin 1, first, the last song off the album, you know, ride dun 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 boom 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 boom. You know, you got that nice solid foundation between these two parts, where you know, then Page can come in with the weird sounds and Plant can come in with his singing and whatnot. And also, it's nice because Bonham, being a Gemini, we are the most scattered in so many ways individuals out there, along with Sagittarians, our partner sign brethren. But it's beautiful that you have this Capricorn with Mercury and Sag, partner sign for Gemini, who's able to, with John Bonham, set that solid foundation, but still let the Gemini go free. And of course, let that Mercury and Sag beautiful bassist music contribution go free as well. And that's something that's really great about these two individuals is, yes, you have a Capricorn with Mercury and Sag and a Gemini with Mercury and Cancer. And so you have this partner sign of how they were in general and how each one thought were naturally like jigsaw puzzles. And so Bonham can go crazy and be the Gemini and be all over the place. John Paul Jones gets that with his Mercury and Sag, because his mind is also all over the place, naturally like Gemini. He gets it, and he's able to build off of it in a very solid way. That Capricornian of, okay, yeah, I get that. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll hold this down. You add a fill there. And then, of course, John Bonham was able to step back. He's able to use that Mercury and Cancer to really sit back and to hold that solid beat to allow John Paul Jones to then go where he would like with his bass. Something that's really important for the understanding of this group is, especially the history of this group, is looking at the Jupiter signs. Jimmy Page is Jupiter in Leo, and this is the same season that gave us Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Jim Morrison. I mean, man, I know I'm biased because I'm Jupiter in Leo as well, but that year of 40, you know, the end of 43, 44, beginning of 44, for example, where Jimmy Page was born, is just replete with amazing musicians who have gone on to really contribute great sounds to this world. And Jimmy Page is honestly one of these individuals par excellence. He was the one who, especially on Led Zeppelin 1, orchestrated everything. He was the producer. Now, it's important to note that especially as time goes on, Robert Plant gets more comfortable writing the lyrics, more comfortable, JPJ, Bonham, and Plant all become more comfortable to add their voices to the mix. And they were always a part of the mix. Again, Led Zeppelin isn't Jimmy Page's project. It's these four individuals, but it's important to realize that it started off and it makes sense, with the Jupiter and Leo's vision. Jimmy had been working in studios for years, and he had been even in a band, the Yardbirds, before Led Zeppelin, and he had all these ideas that he wanted to try. You know, he had been doing the famous violin solo that he does on Dazed and Confused, for example. He would do that with the Yardbirds. And he had all these ideas and creative vision, and he had it with the Yardbirds too. He was willing to go with that, but it just wasn't meant to be. But hence Led Zeppelin came to form. But it's really interesting to how, of course, age has its factor, especially Capricorn, who's older than everybody else, is going to have clout, it's going to have authority. But you add that Jupiter and Leo, and it makes sense that Jimmy was the brainchild of so much of Led Zeppelin's music, and how he kind of was the engine in a lot of ways. And again, I don't wish to generalize because different songs started in different ways. Again, John Paul Jones is amazing riff for Black Dog, and so many other songs. But it's very interesting to note that the Jupiter and Leo kind of orchestrated it all, and especially in the beginning. And he had that vision, that overall creative vision that really allowed the other three individuals to then do their part. And it was Jimmy's tolerance, ironically, because he as he said, he wanted artistic control and a vice grip. Quote, uh, when he went about doing Led Zeppelin 1, he knew exactly what he was going for. Still, he had the wisdom, the tolerance, the open-heartedness to then say, okay, this is all of us. Let's all contribute. Let's do this. And that's where that natural Jupiter fire energy worked out really well with the rest of the band. You have Robert Plant and John Bonham, born 4 years after Page, almost 5 in the sense of, in the case of Plant. But both of these individuals, Bonham and Plant, have Jupiter in Sagittarius. And it's sad to note that Jupiter and Sag, one of their challenges in life is excess, and unfortunately Bonham succumbed to excess of alcohol, and hence why he died. But in any case, another nice thing is Jupiter and Sag is they really love traveling, hence why Led Zeppelin traveled so much and toured so much, especially in the earlier years. And they work so well with Jupiter and Leo. And so you have this individual, Jimmy Page, who's incredibly creative, has this vision, has this creative fire burning within him. And then you have these two individuals who are a little almost unstable, as Jupiter and Sag is, especially compared to Jupiter and Leo, which is fixed fire. Jupiter and Sag, mutable fire, all over the place, and especially Jupiter and Sag, because Jupiter rules Sag. So these two individuals love to party, hence the early days, those early tours of Led Zeppelin have some infamous stories with groupies and all sorts of debauchery and excess. But what's really beautiful, too, is the positive sides, the more uplifting versions, manifestations of this energy, which is that same willingness to just go and not even just a willingness, but a eagerness to explore different musical vistas and to incorporate them fearlessly into the mix, to not get bogged down. And really, Led Zeppelin never got bogged down throughout their entire history. There might be an album or even 2 albums or so in a row or something that you may not enjoy, perhaps, but there is something of innovative in quality and value with each of their albums. They never got stuck. They never got down in a rut. And I think a big part of that is those fire Jupiters. Now, let us not forget the man who allowed all of that crazy fire to have a sounding board and to have somebody who would solidly back them up. Jupiter in Libra, John Paul Jones. It fits so beautifully. Just to illustrate this, Jupiter in Leo, fire. Jupiter in Virgo, earth. Jupiter in Libra, air. Jupiter in Scorpio, water. Jupiter in Sag, fire. So we're looking at 3 positive Jupiter energies right next to each other. Leo, Libra, Sagittarius. What does that mean? It means that all of their adventurous spirit, which we all have in some form or another, we're all adventurous in some way, they're able to work together incredibly nicely. Jimmy was able to creatively just have that solar power that is Jupiter and Leo, come up with great ideas and say, hey, it would be great if you had something that went along with this. I have some ideas for this. What do you think? To have then, of course, those 2 Jupiter and Sagittarius, or yeah, I'll try it. Yeah, let's try it. Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, absolutely. To have the confidence, the wherewithal to follow that vision. And of course, it's important to note, to contribute their own vision as well. And equally as powerful, equally as flaming and on fire and amazing as Jupiter and Leo. And then you have, of course, John Paul Jones, Jupiter and Libra, thank God, tying all of these individuals together to actually be able to balance each other and to work with each other. And you have somebody that, although they have their own fire energy, their own Sag, for example, Mercury and Sag, as we said, John Paul Jones is Jupiter and Libra, one of their best attributes is their ability to bounce off ideas with each other, with other people, and to also both with other people's ideas and their own ideas. And indeed, one of my best friends and bandmates has this energy, Jupiter and Libra, and as a Jupiter and Leo myself, it's marvelous for me to marvel at our chemistry, at how either one of us will have an idea, even good ideas, but the other one adds such a perspective to it that it takes it to a whole nother level. Brand new, brand new soundscape. And so you have four individuals who are very musically adept, as we've already covered, but also very musically adventurous and very able to work with each other to bring out the best in themselves and the best in each other. And again, even though Jimmy had that older authority, in a sense, every single one of Led Zeppelin's members mattered. They were crucial. And even with that Jupiter and Leo vision, he needed those two wild childs of Jupiter and Sag, Plant and Bonham, and the more relaxed, more input-output perspective John Paul Jones with Jupiter and Libra. And if you listen to Led Zeppelin, you hear all the different variations of this. How Jupiter and Libra, it's interesting to note, has a soft spot for a lot of lighter and brighter music. And you hear that, especially I think in like Caras Alhambra, for example, off of a track off of an album actually that John Paul Jones really pushed forward musically and creatively because of a variety of issues at the time that Page was facing, and Plant as well, and but in any case, yes, you hear this lightness of Jupiter and Libra, that John Paul Jones touch, able to really add a different sound to the palette of Led Zeppelin. And of course, you also have the other side. Jupiter and Libra can get as dark and weird and mysterious and powerful as any other energy out there. And so you hear No Quarter, for example, where it's still it's hard to put into words the connection that song has with Caras Alhambra, because they have such very different vibes, but there's a similitude because of John Paul Jones's crucial contribution, indeed birthing those tracks, that it really shows just how versatile John Paul Jones was, and Jupiter and Libra is a versatile energy, and so it's so great, especially looking at these four individuals, see how they all came together. Okay, so let's see. We've talked a lot. Let's see. Is there anything else we can talk about for this? I think one last thing that's really good to note, and that makes a lot of sense for those confused about Led Zeppelin, why they broke up, is Robert Plant and John Bonham knew each other. They played together in a band called Band of Joy before joining Led Zeppelin. Know each other for quite a while in the Midlands area in Birmingham, and they both have Venus in Cancer, and that was a really, for one, I'd like to note that adds a lot of imagination and a lot of just emotional power to Robert Plant's vocals, and it allowed him to get vulnerable and sensitive and emotional in ways that Sun in Leo in the House of Sag really doesn't want to do. Is able to, but you need that Venus in Cancer to add that sensitivity. Just like with Bonham, you need that Venus in Cancer to add that ability to give as well as take, that ability to sit back and to support and to not be in the spotlight, and to not be just all over the place, to be more of a team. And it's really sad, but it makes sense too how devastating it was to lose Bonham, especially, for all three of them, but especially for Plant, who had known him for so long, and who had this Venus connection. When you have the same Venus as somebody that you play music with, especially, speaking from personal experience, you just get each other in such a magical way, and you hear that between the drums and the vocals in Led Zeppelin, where they accent each other, they augment each other, and they don't get in each other's way. You have two very loud instruments not working against each other, but instead seamlessly working together. And of course, you have that Moon and Pisces connection as well. That's a crucial bond between these two individuals. But that's even more, it says even more of their profound, impossible to put into words bond, because Venus and Cancer, again, that's such a strong bond already, but Venus or rather Cancer is ruled by the moon. And so how they appreciate art, again, that's the Venus principle, how they appreciate art and how they express themselves were very much not only natural to each other and they just got each other, but because of that moon connection as well, it was so deep. They felt it in ways that, again, are just impossible to replicate, impossible to recreate with anyone who doesn't have that chemistry, let alone that history. And so it's very sad, but it makes sense at how Plant, out of the three remaining members of Led Zeppelin, is the most, actually really the only one who doesn't want to do reunion stuff. And it although it's unfortunate they don't even do like maybe a show a year or something, it makes sense that losing Bonham was so traumatic and so life-changing, let alone musically life-changing, that when Led Zeppelin's time was up, it was up. So, okay, we've talked a lot about the astrology. Let's look at what Led Zeppelin as a band, what we should learn from them as musicians, as music lovers, as however you're approaching this video. You have a band that was brave, competent, sensitive, versatile, interested in all sorts of different music, whether it's Jimmy Page being influenced by Arabic and Indian, and hell, Plant was interested. I think really they were all interested in all sorts of different kinds of music, but especially Page with Arabic, Indian, and folk music, Celtic folk music especially, hence such beautiful songs as God, what's the name of that song? All I can think of is When the Levee Breaks. When the Levee Breaks. It's off that album though. Battle of Evermore. God, of course. Battle of Evermore, or Going to California. Or Black Mountain Side off the first album. You have that variety of experiences, and again, everyone was interested in all sorts of kinds of music, but that they brought that competency to that interest, and they brought that passion as well, and so they were able to pull off amazing soundscapes that are vast and challenging and yet cohesive as well. With every track that they did, even the songs off of Coda, for example, which were was very an impromptu thing. They had to deliver an album after Bonham's death. Contractually, there wasn't a lot of tracks to work with. They basically just Page had to go into the studio and see what he could work with. Still, that's a good album. Those songs are cohesive. Each one makes sense. And it shows that they all really poured their heart and soul into it. So that's such an important mix in music, is competency and soul. And let alone, as I was saying before, a variety of interests, taking in all sorts of different kinds of music, not limiting yourself, not saying this is the kind of band we are, this is all that we're capable of, this is what we're going to do, this is what we do best. Led Zeppelin never did that. Never did that. They were always challenging themselves. And they were growing as a result. I mean, they were already fantastic musicians when you got them together, when they came together for Led Zeppelin 1. I mean, with the insane bass drum skills of Bonham, for example, off of Good Times, Bad Times, the great keys already off of Your Time Is Gonna Come by JPJ, or just a really fantastic bass on that entire album. The ear-splitting in the best possible way, piercing shrieks of Plant, and also the stuff that he doesn't get as much attention for, but still people love just as much, which is the softer, the more relaxed, more vulnerable and sensitive. Zeppelin has just as many tracks like that, whether it's Thank You or Tangerine, Going to California, whatever, that are just as, they've just made tracks like that where they show their heart openly, vulnerably, as they do Immigrant Song, just a rollicking fucking pounder of a track. So they have, again, competency and soul. Listen to all sorts of music. Practice. Be competent at your instrument, according to your own standards. It's important to do that, to really have faith in the music and have faith in your passion and to keep going despite hardship. I mean, God, Led Zeppelin faced such hardship. The difficulties I was saying before with Page was heroin addiction in the late 70s, which detracted a lot from his creative output for In Through the Outdoor, the album with Carousel Alhambra. I mean, God, Robert Plant was in a horrible accident. His son died during the span of Led Zeppelin. JPJ had difficulties being on the road so much. He wanted to be more with his family, and there were a couple times when he was like, I feel like quitting. The other band members like, no. And even throughout Bonham's addiction to alcohol, these guys were competent. They had their shit together, and they made sure to be competent. And so their soul, which is natural, we all have it, could then pour forth because they found these other competent musicians who had versatile interests, who had versatile ideas of what to do, and who were brave enough to go for it, to let their soul speak through different mediums, different songs, whether it's something like Stairway to Heaven, or again, The Crunge, or whatever. And Led Zeppelin got together to make music. They made music, and it was never for fame or fortune. That really wasn't the interest for them. They were for music junkies getting together and celebrating their skills and each other's skills as a unit. And that's for me is the most inspiring thing about Led Zeppelin, is how cohesive they were. You have bands like the Beatles, for example. They're so great, they are, but then they just falls apart, and their chemistry wasn't as equal. This is Paul's song, this is John's song. You don't really have that at all with Led Zeppelin. You don't have this is Jimmy Page's song, because yeah, Jimmy may have an amazing solo, not like he does like so many songs, but still the bass is fucking solid. John Bonham's drums are solid. Plant is solid. And so I really can't think of for any one of the members there being a song, or an album that is their album. Now, granted, of course, there was a lot. Again, Jimmy Page really orchestrated a lot of Led Zeppelin 1. In Through the Outdoor had a lot more contribution from Plant and Jones, but there's still a lot of really great guitar music, for example, on In Through the Outdoor, and there's amazing contributions from the other three members for Led Zeppelin 1. So long story short, they all were in it together. They had a common musical purpose, their methods synced up, and this world has missed them ever since them breaking up, and yet cherished and heralded their amazing music ever since as well, as they will continue to do. Awesome. I think that's everything. So thank you for tuning in. So good to see you.